I found my daughter's laptop open on the kitchen counter, and I almost didn't look. Almost. The screen was facing away from me, but as I reached past it to grab the dish towel, I caught a glimpse of something that made my hand stop mid-air. A spreadsheet, numbers in red, and at the top in bold, 4418 Mercer Street, estimated equity $387,000. That's my address. I told myself it was nothing. Estate planning, maybe. She'd mentioned once that she wanted to help me get organized. I was 63 years old and perfectly organized, but I didn't say that. I just smiled and said that sounded nice. That was 3 months before everything fell apart. My name is Wanda. I spent 31 years as a pediatric nurse at Emory University Hospital in Atlanta, Georgia. I raised my daughter Renee alone after her father left when she was 4. Not dramatically, not with a fight. He just stopped coming home one Tuesday, and eventually the child support checks followed the same pattern. Irregular, then gone. I worked holidays. I worked doubles. I bought Renee a car for her 18th birthday with money I'd been folding into an envelope in my sock drawer for 2 years. I am not a woman who asks for much. But I am also not a woman who misses things twice. Renee moved back in with me 14 months ago. Her and her husband Terence, they'd been living in Charlotte. Something about his job ending, something about lease problems, something that was always a little vague around the edges when I asked specific questions. I said yes because she's my child. You say yes to your child. You figure out the rest later. The thing about living with family is that you stop locking your office door. You stop closing your laptop. You stop treating your own home like a place where your privacy matters, because you're all family and family doesn't snoop. That's what I told myself. Terence made me uncomfortable from the beginning. Not in any way I could point to directly. He was polite. Always said thank you for dinner. Always offered to take out the trash. But there was something about the way his eyes moved around a room, calculating, the way a person looks at a space when they're measuring it, not living in it. I ignored it. Renee seemed happy, or happy enough, and I didn't want to be the mother who made her daughter choose. The spreadsheet didn't leave my mind, though. I thought about it while I was making coffee the next morning. I thought about it during my Tuesday water aerobics class. I thought about it at 2 a.m. when I should have been sleeping. A week later I mentioned to Renee that I was thinking about updating my will, just to see what she'd say. Her response came too fast. "Oh, Mum, we were actually just talking about that. Terence has a friend who's an estate attorney, really affordable. We could all sit down together, make sure everything's in order. We could all sit down together. I said I'd think about it. That night I went through my filing cabinet. Everything was where it should be. Deed to the house, insurance documents, retirement account statements. I took photos of everything with my phone and emailed them to myself. I don't know exactly why. Some instinct, the same instinct that made me notice the spreadsheet. The invitation to Savannah came from Renee in early April. Her college roommate Portia was getting married. Destination weekend. Girls' trip. Just the 2 of us. Like old times, Mum. Remember when we drove to Hilton Head that summer? I remembered. Renee was 16 and we sang along to every song on the radio and stayed in a motel with a pool shaped like a kidney bean and ate shrimp every night because we could. It was one of the best weekends of my life. I'd love that, I told her. Terence would stay home, Renee said, hold down the fort. He had job interviews lined up anyway. We drove down on a Friday morning. The wedding was Saturday evening, outdoor ceremony, beautiful in that soft coastal Georgia way, all Spanish moss and string lights. Renee looked happy. She hugged Portia and cried a little and laughed, and I thought, this is still my daughter, the girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. Sunday morning we had breakfast on the hotel patio, biscuits and sweet tea. and Renee said she had to make a quick call for work. She stepped inside. 35 minutes passed. When she came back, something was different. She was quieter, kept checking her phone under the table. I asked if everything was okay. She said she needed to go back early. Something with Terence. He wasn't feeling well. I can pack in 20 minutes, I said. No, Mum. She said it gently but firmly. You should stay, enjoy the rest of the weekend. The room's paid through Monday. Portia would love to spend more time with you. I looked at her. I'm your ride, Renee. I'll take the bus. There's a direct one at noon. She was already looking at her phone, already somewhere else. You deserve a break, seriously, stay. Something sat wrong in my chest. The way she said it, the timing. But she kissed my cheek, and she was my daughter, and I watched her roll her small bag across the patio and disappear through the lobby. I sat with my sweet tea and the feeling that something was happening that I didn't understand yet. I didn't stay through Monday. I drove home Sunday evening. I told myself I just wanted my own bed. That's all. Just my bed, my house, my coffee maker. I turned onto Mercer Street at 7:42 p.m. and the first thing I noticed was that the lights in my home office were on. I always turned those off. I pulled into the driveway. Terence's car was there, but also a van I didn't recognize. White, no markings, backed up close to the side door. I sat in my car for a moment. Then I got out. The side door was unlocked. I walked into my kitchen and stopped. A man I had never seen was carrying a box through my hallway. Not a large box, not moving furniture. A box the size of something you'd pack carefully, delicately. He saw me and froze. Terence came around the corner a second later and his face did something complicated. Surprise, then recovery, then the performance of casualness that doesn't quite make it to the eyes. Wonder. You're back early. I live here. The man with the box set it down on my floor and looked at Terence. Terence gave him a small nod that I was not supposed to see. We were just reorganizing some storage, Terence said, trying to free up some space. I walked past him into the hallway. My grandmother's china cabinet, the one my mother left me. The one I refinished myself with sandpaper and 3 coats of paint the summer Renee was in 5th grade. The glass doors were open. The shelves were half empty. I turned around and looked at Terence. Where is it? What? The china. My grandmother's china. Where is it? He opened his mouth, closed it. The man who'd been carrying the box had quietly moved toward the side door. Don't, I said without looking at him. Don't leave with that box. He stopped. I called Renee. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I called again. Same. Terence was talking, something about how they were just keeping things safe, just making sure the valuable pieces were stored properly while the house was. And then he said something that made everything in my body go still. While the house is going through the transition. What transition? I said. He stopped talking. I went to my office. The filing cabinet was closed but not locked, and when I opened the bottom drawer, the folder that held my deed was there. I pulled it out, unfolded it. For a moment it looked right, my name, the address, the county seal. Then I read further. The paper I was holding was not my original deed, it was a copy, and paper clipped to the back of it was a document I had never seen before, a quitclaim deed, dated 6 weeks ago, signed in my name, notarized, transferring the property to Renee Odom Wash. Renee's married name. My hands didn't shake. That surprised me. I had always assumed that if something truly terrible happened, my hands would shake. They didn't. They just went very still, like they were waiting for the rest of me to catch up. I set the document on my desk. I called my neighbor across the street, a retired schoolteacher named Arthur who kept odd hours and never minded being called. He answered on the second ring. "Arthur, I need you to come over and witness something." He was at my door in 4 minutes. I showed him the document. I showed him the half-empty china cabinet. I showed him the man still standing awkwardly in my hallway with the box at his feet. Arthur looked at all of it with the slow, careful attention of a man who had spent 40 years teaching teenagers to think critically. "Do you want me to call someone?" he asked. "Not yet, but I want you to remember everything you're seeing right now." He nodded. He's that kind of man. I told the man in the hallway to put the box down and leave without taking anything. He looked at Terence. Terence looked at me. Something in my face must have made the decision clear, because the man left. Then I told Terence to sit down at my kitchen table. He tried to reach Renee while I was making coffee. I didn't stop him. I wanted her to come home. I had things to say that needed to be said in person. She walked in 45 minutes later. She'd been close. The bus to Savannah didn't leave until noon. She'd told me that herself. Which meant she'd never planned to take the bus. She'd driven to somewhere nearby and waited. She came in looking composed, and that composure was the thing that finally made something crack open in my chest. Not the deed, not the china, the composure. My daughter, who I had rocked through nightmares and driven to every doctor's appointment and held when her first real heartbreak hit at 19, she came into my kitchen looking composed. "Mom." She sat down across from me. "I can explain." "Okay," I said. "Explain." What followed was 40 minutes of the most painful conversation of my life. The debt. She said it first, before I could ask. They were in serious trouble. More than $60,000 across multiple cards, a personal loan, and a line of credit Terence had taken out that she hadn't known about until 6 months ago. 2 collections calls a week, 1 creditor threatening to sue. "The house was the only asset," she said. "I knew you'd never agree if I asked directly. So you forged my signature." She didn't answer immediately. "There's a notary who—" "He came to the house. He was told you'd signed the preliminary documents already and just needed the final." "Who told him that?" Silence. "Renee." "Who told him that?" "Terence handled it." I looked at my son-in-law. He was looking at the table. "You took me to Savannah," I said to my daughter. "You planned the whole weekend so Terence could finish clearing out the house while I was gone." She started crying, real tears which almost broke me because I knew they were real. She wasn't performing. She was genuinely ashamed and genuinely desperate and genuinely convinced that they hadn't had another choice. That's the thing about love that gets used against you. It doesn't become fake just because someone weaponized it. I let her cry. I didn't comfort her. Then I told them both to go to the guest room and give me an hour alone in my own house to think. That hour was the longest of my life. I sat at my kitchen table and thought about everything in order. The spreadsheet on the laptop, the estate attorney offer, the Savannah trip, the man with the box, the quitclaim deed, 40 years of raising a daughter and 31 years of nursing, and this house that I had paid for with my own hands, and my own time, and my own sacrifice. Then I thought about what I was going to do about it. My first call was to a woman from my church, Beverly Tate, who'd gone through a property dispute with a sibling 2 years ago and had come out the other side intact. She gave me the name of her attorney, Patricia Hollins, family law and real estate fraud, downtown Atlanta, 22 years of practice. I called Patricia Hollins's office at 8:15 in the morning and left a message describing the situation in 3 sentences. She called back at 9:71. "Come in today," she said. "Bring everything." I brought everything. The quitclaim deed, my original filing documents, Photos I'd taken of the empty china cabinet, Arthur's written account of what he'd seen, and a note I'd made the night before listing every concerning incident I could remember, with dates and details going back 14 months. Patricia was direct in the way of someone who'd stopped softening news for clients years ago. Not unkind, just honest. "A quitclaim deed signed without your knowledge is fraud," she said. "The question is proving you didn't sign it. That requires a handwriting expert, and it requires finding the notary. Can we find the notary? There's a name and seal on the document. I'll have someone on it by this afternoon. The retainer was $3,500. I wrote the check without hesitation. Some expenses are not optional. The notary was a man named Tester Boyle, freelance, operating out of a home office in Decatur. Patricia's investigator found him within 48 hours. He was nervous when they called. Nervous, she told me, in the way of someone who already knew they'd done something wrong and had been waiting for the consequences. He agreed to a meeting. When I saw Chester Boyle, he was exactly what I'd expected, a man who'd needed quick cash and told himself the circumstances were legitimate and had been trying not to think about it since. He was in his 50s, tired-looking, with the posture of someone carrying something heavy. "I was told you were out of town," he said, looking at his hands. "That the preliminary agreements were already signed and you'd authorized your daughter to complete the process. Did I give that authorization in writing?" He was quiet. "Did you speak to me personally at any point?" "No." "Did you ask for documentation proving my daughter had authority to act on my behalf?" Long pause. "Your son-in-law said there wasn't time, that the transfer needed to happen before a creditor filing came through. He signed a sworn statement that afternoon. Patricia notarized it herself, which I thought was appropriate. Meanwhile, I'd reported the theft of my grandmother's china and several other pieces to the Atlanta Police Department. The responding officer, a young woman named Officer Reyes, took the report with the careful attention of someone who understood what she was actually looking at. "Is the suspect living in the residence?" she asked. "My daughter and her husband have been living with me for 14 months. The items removed are solely mine. I have documentation of provenance for the china going back to 1962. She took everything down. She didn't make promises, but she took it seriously." Patricia filed the motion to invalidate the quitclaim deed based on fraud and lack of authorization on a Thursday morning. By Friday, Renee had hired her own attorney, a man named Griggs who specialized in exactly this kind of family property dispute, which told me she'd known this day might come and had planned for it. That hurt more than I expected. Griggs's first move was to argue that I had tacitly authorized the transfer by allowing Renee to handle my financial affairs in other contexts. Patricia dismantled that in her response brief in about 4 paragraphs. His second move was a settlement offer, delivered through Arthur of all people, who came to my door one evening looking deeply uncomfortable. "Renee asked me to pass along a message," he said. "She's sorry to put me in the middle, but she wanted you to know they're willing to sign the house back over to you in exchange for a $75,000 payment to help them settle the debt." I stood on my porch and looked at Arthur. $75,000, I said. "That's what she said. Tell her no." Arthur nodded slowly. "I thought that might be your answer. Tell her that if she wants to discuss this, she can call Patricia Hollins." He went back across the street. I watched him go and then stood alone on my porch for a while, in the warm Atlanta evening, and thought about every morning I'd gotten up before 5 a.m. to make it to a double shift so Renee could have what she needed. Thought about the car I bought her, the college I'd helped pay for, the year she'd had her wisdom teeth out and couldn't work, and I'd sent $200 a month without being asked. $75,000? No. The hearing was set for a Wednesday morning in Fulton County Superior Court. Judge Carl Emerson, known for efficiency and impatience with procedural games. Patricia had assembled what she called a straightforward case, which in attorney language meant difficult to argue against. Chester Boyle's sworn statement. The handwriting analysis from an expert who compared the signature on the quitclaim to 30 documented samples of my actual signature and found 16 points of divergence. The real estate agent emails Renee had sent 2 months before the Savannah trip, requesting property valuations, which Patricia's investigator had obtained through Renee's business email, technically accessible through public records connected to her LLC. And the search history. Terence's phone, which the police had obtained as part of the theft investigation, showed searches from 4 months before the Savannah trip, how to transfer property without owner's consent. Quitclaim deed requirements, Georgia. What happens if someone contests a property transfer? Can a notary be held liable for fraudulent signing? He had researched every step of this. Patricia laid it out in court with the economy of someone who'd done this many times and knew that judges respected clarity. Griggs countered that financial desperation wasn't proof of fraud, that families made informal estate planning decisions all the time, that my signature's variations could be explained by any number of factors. Judge Emerson asked Renee 2 questions from the bench. Did you inform your mother that the document she was signing transferred ownership of her home? Renee sat in the witness chair and looked at me for the first time since we'd all been in the same room. I held her eyes. I didn't look away. No, she said quietly. Did the notary personally witness your mother sign this document? Pause. No. Emerson made a note. He didn't look up. His ruling came that same afternoon. The quitclaim deed was declared null and void, obtained through fraudulent misrepresentation. My property remained mine. Renee and Terence were ordered to return all removed items within 72 hours or face contempt charges. He referred the matter of the notarization to the Georgia Secretary of State's office for review of Chester Boyle's license. He also made a comment, quiet and measured, at the end of his ruling. The court notes that this family chose deception over conversation. Many disputes of this nature begin with a financial crisis that felt unsolvable. That crisis was real. The solution chosen was not. I sat at Patricia's table and listened to the gavel and felt something I hadn't expected to feel in that moment. Tired, just tired, not triumphant, not vindicated, exactly. Just tired in the way you get tired when something you hoped wouldn't be true turns out to be true anyway, and now you have to figure out what to do with a life that's been rearranged. Renee called me 3 days later, not to negotiate, just to talk. I answered because she's my daughter. Not because everything was fine. It wasn't fine. But she called and I answered. She said she was sorry. She said it the way someone says it when they mean it, but also know that it doesn't fix anything. She said Terence had convinced her there was no other way, that by the time she understood the full shape of what they were doing it was already in motion, that she'd told herself the house would always technically be hers and therefore mine in some way she couldn't quite articulate now, and was ashamed to have believed then. I listened. I didn't tell her it was okay. It wasn't okay. I told her that I loved her, that I would probably always love her, that love and trust were not the same thing, and she had broken the second one badly enough, that I didn't know yet what we would look like on the other side of it. She cried. I held the phone and let her. The stolen items came back delivered by Terence with no eye contact and no words. I inventoried everything. The china was intact. The small things. A silver frame, a quilt my mother had made. A jewelry box with my nursing school graduation pin inside. All there. One piece missing, a crystal vase that had been a wedding gift from my mother's best friend in 1974. I filed an additional report. Terence claimed it had broken in transit. I had my doubts. I had the locks changed that afternoon regardless. Spent $280, money I considered well spent. I met with my own estate attorney the following month. A woman named Helen Greer, recommended by Patricia, who specialized in elder law and asset protection. We updated my will entirely. Clear language, no ambiguity. Upon my death, the house would transfer to the Atlanta chapter of Habitat for Humanity, with a small bequest to Arthur for the years of actual neighborliness, and a separate bequest to my church. Renee would receive nothing from the estate. I signed those papers at Helen's downtown office on a Tuesday afternoon in May, with sunlight coming through the windows and traffic moving on Peachtree below, and I felt something settle in my chest. Not coldness, not punishment, just clarity. I had protected what I'd built. That was enough. She's still my daughter. That's the part people don't tell you about when they hear a story like this one and want it to end clean. She didn't stop being my daughter when she chose wrong. I didn't stop loving her. I just stopped trusting that love alone was enough to keep me safe. There are people who will take from you not because they're strangers, but because they know you. Because they know you'll answer when they call. Because they know you'll say yes when things are hard. Because they have watched you sacrifice and concluded, maybe without ever saying it out loud, that you are someone who can be asked to give up anything. I worked 31 years. I raised a child by myself. I bought this house with money I saved over a decade in a job that asked everything of me on a daily basis. I survived a husband who left and a system that didn't always make it easy for a woman like me to build what I built. I am 63 years old and I am still in my house. My grandmother's china is back on its shelves. The lock on my door is one that only I have a key to. Some things you fight for not because winning feels good, but because walking away would mean something you're not willing to accept. It would mean agreeing that what you built doesn't belong to you, that your name on a document is negotiable, that the people you loved can decide for you what you deserve to keep. I'm not that woman. I never was. I still think about that spreadsheet sometimes, the way it was just sitting there, open on the counter, facing away from me like it was trying to hide. I almost didn't look. I've asked myself 100 times what would have happened if I hadn't. What I know is this. The outcome of that whole terrible year wasn't luck. It wasn't fate working in my favor or some force in the universe deciding I deserved to keep what I'd earned. It was a series of choices. Renee and Terence made theirs. And when the moment came, I made mine. There's a version of me that doesn't look at that spreadsheet, that goes to Savannah and has a beautiful weekend, and comes home Monday to a house that's already half emptied, to locks that have already been changed on a door with my name on the deed. That version of me trusted completely and paid for it completely. I don't judge her. I understand her. I was her for most of my life. But something shifted when I saw those numbers on that screen. Something quiet and old. The part of me that survived 31 years of night shifts and a husband who left, and a bank manager who looked at me like I was asking for something I hadn't earned. That part woke up and said, "Pay attention." Paying attention is its own kind of moral act. I don't think we talk about that enough. We talk about honesty, about kindness, about doing right by people. We don't always talk about the responsibility you have to yourself, the obligation to take your own life seriously enough to protect it. Renee counted on me not taking it seriously. She counted on love being enough of a distraction that I wouldn't look too closely. That's not a failure of love. That's a failure of something I had to reclaim. The understanding that I mattered enough to fight for. The intelligence it took to get through that year wasn't the kind that comes from a degree or a title. It was the kind that comes from slowing down when everything in you wants to panic, from photographing documents before you know why, from calling Arthur before you know what you're going to say, from choosing a lawyer based on outcomes, not comfort, from reading the room in a courtroom and understanding that clarity is more persuasive than emotion, I had learned those things in 31 years of nursing, in a career where a moment's confusion could cost someone something irreplaceable. I just had to remember I could apply them to my own life, and the will to keep going. That part was never in question, not really. Not once I understood what was at stake. People ask me if it was hard. The legal process. The money. The months of uncertainty. Of course it was hard, but hard and impossible are different things, and I think we confuse them when we're scared. The retainer was $3,500. I wrote the check. The locksmith was $280. I paid it. Every dollar spent was a dollar that said, "This is mine and I am not walking away from it." What I want anyone to take from this is simple. The people who try to take from you are not always strangers. Sometimes they sat at your kitchen table for 14 months. Sometimes you drove them to school. Sometimes you love them. That doesn't mean you owe them your silence, or your house, or your name on a document you didn't read. You built what you built. Don't let anyone convince you that being loved by you gives them a right to it.